First Things, episode number 58.
I seem to be lost.
And so you're working around the clock so you don't take time for yourself to feel like an actual human being.
I used to feel like no matter how hard I worked, I was just spinning my wheels.
Try to be perfect and try to have everything in place at one point in time, and you can't.
Well, hello, my friends, and welcome to First Things, the podcast dedicated to practical productivity based on modern research. My name is Brandon Vaughn, and it's my goal to help you apply productive solutions to your life to help you live with less stress, greater passion, and amazing results. Today, we are going to do something a little different. We will return to our study on essentialism next week, but I wanted to have a dialogue with you today. This episode would probably be a little bit shorter than my typical episodes, but have had a lot of stuff on my mind these last weeks, and I wanted to just share some of that with you guys here and not keep you here for an hour while I rant and banter about all sorts of things. But I want to talk to you a little bit about essentialism as I've been experiencing it lately, and also to talk about the future of this podcast and needing your help with that. And you may say, what help do you need? And I'm not asking for money or anything like that. So no worries about that. But I'll talk about that in just a minute. When I was at Seattle, gosh, what was that, a week or 2 weeks ago now, at a conference and coming back, I started really trying to put some of this essentialism teaching into practice. I mentioned this last week, how I formed a grid and started writing down what would I do if I only had a year to live, or 5 years to live, or 1 month to live. That type of exercise is really fruitful. It is for me, because it really just kind of cuts through the chase of what really matters the most. I think if you're like me, the things that matter the most when it comes down to really narrow windows of time are mostly family and maybe friends. That's really the biggest resonator for most people. And that's what I had on my list as well. But in doing these exercises, I realized when I got over into the year category, okay, so I have a year to live, not just a month. Well, what would I do now? What really invigorates me? What is it that is passionate for me? And I've mentioned this so many times on the program, but I've just let it slip for many weeks now and many months. And that would be music, and that would be writing. Now, I had a great conversation with my friend Tori today, which I always tell you I'm going to bring him on the show one day. And we just got to figure out a way to make that happen. He was finishing up a graduate degree not too long ago, and now he's finished with that. So really we have no excuses for trying to do something pretty quick together. But we were talking about the prospect of writing books. And to be honest with you, I've had big dilemmas for this because there are competing reasons why I want to write books. One of those is, I think, a pure reason, and that is I have some things inside of me I want to talk about. And I like writing, and I think I would enjoy doing some of that. When I was in academic circles, I thought I would love writing research articles, and what I found out was that you had to play this big game in order to gain tenure, that you had to do certain types of articles in order for them to grant you tenure. And I thought, I thought the whole reason why I got a doctorate was so that I could do any type of research I wanted to. Because I thought, man, that is fun to think I could just do the type of research I want to do. So I don't care where I'm at. If I want to do sleep studies, I could do that. If I want to do studies on better education, I could do that. If I want to do statistical, oh, no. You can't do too many of those articles now, Brandon, because if you do that, you're not going to get tenure, and you need to do these types of articles. And I'm thinking, this is a bunch of baloney. I didn't spend all my time to do this type of thing, and I got tired of it. I got so tired of doing that. But there was an element that I enjoyed writing. I enjoyed doing the initial drafts many, many times. I didn't always enjoy the banter back and forth with reviewers at the various journals you try to publish in. But writing is still a resonator with me, and there's certain types of messages I do want to write. Messages, even in the theme of this podcast, some of the things we've been talking about in your thinking and your self-worth and resilience and things like that, I definitely have desires to write that. And when I was talking to my friend Tori, we were bantering back and forth the idea, of motives behind this and why do I want to do this? And I don't really want to do this to become famous and to be known, although that would be cool. I mean, I think I'd be lying to you if I said that I would write a book and not hope that people would recognize it and say, wow, it's really great, you should read it, and people would want to talk to me because of that. I think I'd be lying if that was the case. But But I really feel like my motives are such that if the only person that read it was me because I bought the only copy on Amazon or on iBooks on iTunes, well, okay, I would still do it anyway. But there is this element in business, as I'm teetering on writing things about statistics as well, where I have these impure motives, because there are many, many things in businesses that just do statistics horrendously, just horrendously. And especially when it comes to things dealing with surveys and psychometrics, which is just the measurement of psychological traits. So surveys would fall under that category. Just make the goofiest mistakes all the time. And for instance, there is this element, I may have mentioned it on one show long time ago, called the Net Promoter Score, and NPS for short. And this guy named Ryan Hell just basically made up something. And to be fair, he really wasn't meaning this to be some scientific measure of things, but he positioned it as this way: the one number you need to know to run your business. Are you likely to recommend blank? Just one question. And you've probably seen this, especially if you ever had somebody say, would you rate us between 0 and 10 or 1 to 10? If anybody ever asks you that in a business, would you rate us through a 1 to a 10? They're probably asking this question. And there's so many things bad about that from a statistical point of view that I keep trying to tell businesses about. I just like, okay, use it if you must, but don't worship this number. And here's all the reasons why you don't want to trust this number too much. It's not a scientific number. And people just don't listen. They just plow right ahead. I've jokingly said to some people that this number is like the new cocaine for executives. The minute they taste it, they want nothing else but this number. So there's part of me that says, okay, what I'm going to do is write a book. Like write a book about psychometrics in business, the missing statistical ingredient or something like that. And honestly, I think I do have a message there, and it would be very interesting to get it out. The problem is I don't really have a pure motive for that, because there's a partly motive there that I want to do it so people will listen to me. And crazy enough, even though I have a doctorate in this, I tend to work with a lot of people who don't have higher degrees, maybe just have MBAs, and they kind of think they know as much about statistics as someone who has a doctorate in statistics. It's just kind of weird. I'm thinking, well, maybe if I wrote a book, you might listen to me then. So there's a lot of impure motives in that, and that's why I'm not writing that book yet. I'm not doing that at all. But definitely is a resonator for me, and when I wrote down what I wanted to do after a year of my life, if I was only to live a year, writing a book was definitely on there. I have a lot of interest in different types of books. I would love to write a fiction book. I would like to write some inspirational type books, some motivational type books. There's a lot of different things I would want to write about. And then the second thing that really resonated with me that I knew I wanted to do was write music. And I've always mentioned this for the longest time on this show. And then I thought, okay, well, where does the podcast fall? Because I was a little bit worried about that, simply because I do enjoy doing the podcast, and I enjoy helping people and reaching out to you guys. But honestly, I did think about this hard because it didn't fall on my 1 year list. When I thought if I really only had 1 year to live, I would pretty much drop everything, such as this podcast, to dedicate it fully to music, to dedicate it fully to writing, to make sure that I lived out those dreams. And I think it's because those are dreams that have yet to be fulfilled for me. If I weren't doing this podcast right now and I was going to start up a new podcast, that might fall on my 1 year plan at that point. But then I went over into the 5 year plan, and I started thinking, okay, 5 years. Okay, now that's a little bit more time to do things. What would I want to do? And the list was a lot bigger of things I would want to do. And when I really thought about it, taking this podcast to the next level was part of that. And I realized I didn't want to abandon the podcast, but it just didn't fall under my highest essential priorities, such as writing music and putting that out and maybe writing a book. Now, I'm telling you all this to give you an illustration of putting into practice some of the things we've been talking about with essentialism. I was also mentioning to my friend today that I've done plenty of episodes in this First Things podcast, which was partially to help me and partially to help you as the listener. So procrastination, there was part of it that I wanted to address in myself, and things I felt very comfortable with that I've learned that I wanted to share with others. It was kind of a mixture. But I'll be honest with you, this essentialism topic that we've been covering the last few weeks is almost predominantly for me. And I'm hopeful that maybe some of you who are listening are getting something out of it, but I'm not sure. And if you weren't, I would still be covering it because I really need to hear its message vitally in my own life. So since I've done that exercise, I've really been pushing myself to instill the highest essential things into my life. So I've been trying to eat better and to embrace some of that in my own life. And I have purposely introduced writing and music really back into my life. Now, the way I've done this is something I've mentioned so many times in past episodes. We covered it in the Now Habit series. And again, it's amazing how if I just don't proactively approach life, how I will forget even the simplest of things and the things that have worked for me before. I've mentioned many episodes ago when I was working on my dissertation, which is basically like a book, except it's probably a lot more boring because nobody's usually going to want to read that type of thing. In fact, I don't think many people have ever read my dissertation. It's not like a book you find at Barnes and Noble. Or if it is like a book at Barnes and Noble, it's the one that nobody ever buys because it's so boring. And I'm sitting there having to write this thing, and I'm under really no deadline. Maybe I have a deadline of 4 years or 5 years. Well, if you have a deadline of 4 or 5 years, you'll find yourself procrastinating all the time. And you'll find that a month has passed, 5 months have passed, 6 months has passed. And I noticed this and I was scared because I'd been in a doctoral program before where taking classes was easy. I love taking classes, hanging out, learning new stuff, reading things. You have deadlines, papers due here, a test is on this date. It was nice. It was nice to do those types of things. But suddenly, when I had this tremendous freedom that all you have to do is write your dissertation, defend it, and then you graduate, but there's no deadline, so it's whenever you get it done. Well, I just floundered. I couldn't thrive in that environment. And I went through a doctoral program where I tried and then basically gave up, and months turned into years and years turned into nothing. And I never finished. And I once chalked it up to, well, it wasn't the type of degree I wanted because at the time I was in an educational program and I was getting a doctorate in curriculum and instruction, but I was mostly doing that because, one, I wanted a doctorate, and it was so stinking convenient because it was basically being held at the college I was teaching at. So I was teaching at a junior college, and this university was coming all the way, like 2 hours out of their way to teach classes at this junior college because they knew there was an audience there that wanted it. They could get some money and help some people. So I'm thinking, wow, this is in my back door. Why not do this? Plus, I had a scholarship at boot. So, I mean, it was just perfect, but I didn't finish. And at the time, I chalked it up to the fact, well, it wasn't a math or statistics degree, and it wasn't a PhD. It was an EDD, which is an educational doctorate, which sometimes people don't look kindly to compared to a PhD, like there's any big difference, but some people see it that way. So I thought, well, okay, here I am in this PhD program now, and I'm traveling 3 hours every day round trip to do this. I think I'm going to be a lot more serious about it, and it's a more prestigious university, more nationally recognized university. I mean, everything's going to be great. Everything that caused me not to get that degree before, I'm going to get it now. And then I found myself 6 months into my dissertation and not having done anything. And it scared me. It scared me a lot. I'm thinking I'm going to do it again. And this is where I started small. I started with baby steps. I started with these small increments of time that we talked about before. And literally, I started out where I said, okay, whatever I'm going to do, I'm going to just do 15 minutes a day. Let me at least do that. Every single day, I'm going to do 15 minutes of work. And then I think eventually I bumped it up to 30 minutes. And when I got into a routine of consistently doing that, because it wasn't overwhelming to me, there were some days I spent 5 or 6 hours on it, and I started gaining momentum. And lo and behold, I finished this incredibly lengthy book, boring book called a dissertation, and I graduated. And I thought, this is the greatest lesson I've ever learned in my life. And then consistently, I keep forgetting it, constantly forgetting this lesson that I learned back then. And this is something that we talked about in the Now Habit, and I really drilled it back into my head. And then I didn't integrate it for some of these passions and some of these essential things we've been talking about. And then it really dawned on me while I was flying home and looking at this list of things to do. What can I do in my life? And also, I've had some recent deaths. I had 2 good friends die just recently. There was one that I was in pretty much weekly contact. We weren't the best of friends, but we were good friends. and suddenly just died of cancer. Just hit him very fast and just completely wiped him out. And he was gone very quick. And then there was another person I just found out recently that was actually a friend of this show. And we had talked quite a bit through kind of correspondence. And then life kind of got busy, and I hadn't heard from this person since July, I think. And I just had this person on my mind this week, and I wrote and said, hey, what's going on? And never heard back, and tried another avenue that we had talked before and never heard back. And then someone wrote me back, I think it was today or yesterday, saying that they were a friend or a relative of this person, and that this person had died on September the 10th. And had, I wrote him back, said what happened, and had some type of breathing troubles. The people called the paramedics treated this person, and supposedly this person went into shock and passed away. And I was just in shock today of this. And so I've had these things where these little exercises of only having a year or 5 years to life have really kind of hit home with me just because of some of these close people to me having died recently. So I started out this week saying, I'm going to do something about this, and I'm going to start small. I'm going to start with baby steps. I'm going to start with 30 minutes, and I'm going to do whatever I need to do to put it into action. And so what I decided to do was, before I went to work in the morning, for 30 minutes, I was going to write, because I seem to be a little bit more focused in the morning to write than I am at night. And at night, I seem to be a little bit more focused to do music than I am in the morning. So I did the same thing at night. I really scheduled 2 hours at night to do music, but that was kind of a hopeful thing. In my mind, I'm sitting there thinking, in the very minimum, what I'm going to do is 30 minutes. And I'm going to do that every single night before I go to bed. 30 minutes of music. And in the morning before I go to work, I'm going to sit down and turn off everything around me, and I'm just going to write for 30 minutes. Well, I've done that. I've done that all this week, and it feels great, because I'm fueling and feeding those very passions I've been ignoring. Now, my music, for instance, I haven't really gotten back into the different genres of stuff I was trying to write. I had started writing a country album of all things, even though I'm more of a rock player, and I'm planning on getting back into that. But a friend of mine back in Alabama, who I used to do some things with musically, sent me some tracks and wanted me to put down some things. And it's usually kind of a rock vibe, and honestly, it isn't really my style of music too much, because basically what they do with this is I add kind of this heavy atmospheric vibe to it, and then they send it off to these really fast-playing guitarists that are in Europe or something who want to get exposed. So it becomes what I call a wank fest. Just people are playing, really fast all the time over it, and covers up all the nuances of what I usually put on there, and you can't even hear it after a while. But I'm going to play it for you after this episode is over. So if you want to stick around, I'll play you what I did this week. I mean, literally, I was doing this just 30 minutes ago, and kind of finished it up. It's not perfect. It's not mixed well. There's a few spots I'd like to kind of fix, but just to show you what I've done. And again, if you don't like it, you can just turn it off. It's going to be at the very end of the episode, but just to show you what I've been doing. And I've been writing every single day. I literally have a chapter written in a book. And I'm hopeful that I can finish this book if I keep up this pace, maybe in 2 months, that I can do that. And then I'm going to start on another book, because I have different genres of stuff, just like I have in music, that I want to write in. So I've been implementing this. And so one of the things I wanted to get on today is to encourage you to do this, to really put this into practice, and take something as simple as 30 minutes or 15 minutes. Every single one of us can afford that. Every single person that's listening to me today can afford to put 15 minutes or 30 minutes into things that you're really passionate about. I don't care if that is learning something new to do something better in your job. If that is taking a class, well, you may need more than 30 minutes if you're taking a class. It could be creating something. There's so many things that you could actually do. And we're going to be getting into a lot more of these types of things in the next few weeks as we continue this essentialism study. Some of my favorite chapters in this book are actually coming up next. The chapter on play, which we'll talk about next week, and then the chapter on sleep, which we're going to talk the week after. And we haven't really talked a lot about sleep, and I'm excited to talk about that because it's been something I've always struggled in my life, hated to sleep, always a waste of time to me when I could be doing other stuff. So I really have been thinking a lot about that of late, changing up some habits there. But the whole thing, you need to focus And I need to focus right now to tell you to focus. We need to focus and deliberately set aside some time every single day. I once heard this about practicing. I took a lesson from some guys long time ago, and they used to really drill into everyone's head that daily practice was much better than a lengthy 1 week practice. So they were saying if you could only practice 15 minutes a day and you could do that every single day of the week, it is much better than if you're able to practice for like 3 hours on a Saturday, because you're training yourself every single day of the week. And this is what I want to encourage you, is not to wait until a Saturday or Sunday or a day off during the week to put into these things that you love and that you're passionate about, but to do it every single day. And if you have to go so small as just 30 minutes or 15 minutes, then do that. But do it consistently and pursue these things that really resonate with you. Okay, so now let's talk about the podcast a little bit and why I need your help and what I'm asking you to do. When I first started out this podcast, I thought I would create another basic productivity podcast. And there were already a lot of them out there, such as Michael Hyatt and people, similar to him. There was a lot of people out there like that. And I thought, well, okay, I'll join the ranks and I'll do some things that I don't ever hear them talk about and base it a little bit more on research, because I don't really hear a lot of them base it on research. And also we do lots of topics. So, we spent, 12 or 15 weeks talking about procrastination. I've never really heard any of these other productivity podcasts do that. One of the things that I realized I ended up talking a lot more about, and basically has become the new theme of the show. Eventually, I may rebrand the show and come up with some new logos and things like that. What's really happened is the show has become more about the psychology of productivity more than productivity itself. We've occasionally talked about things like tools and things like that, but not much. We've talked about email in 1 or 2 episodes, but it's not a big thing. What we deal with a lot more instead is what's going on inside your head. What are you thinking about before you get into productivity? Where are you basing your worth as a person? Why are you procrastinating in the first place? Because I find that those are the bigger battles. And if you can win those battles, then what email program you use and whether you have a zero inbox and things like that just kind of fall into place. But if you don't have the essential things like what we're talking about now in place, then you're really screwed up pretty bad. And that's become pretty much the theme of the show. But there's several things I want to change in the show. There's one of these where maybe I try to get some people that I really like talking to, like my friend Tori, more on the show. Maybe have it a little bit more conversational. I definitely want more conversations with you guys and to hear more what you've said. Some of you started doing that on my discussion at my website, which is firstThingsProductivity.com, and it's things plural. I always wonder if people type in first thing, THING, productivity.com. I'm not even sure where that takes you, but it's things plural, THINGS. But several of you left comments for me, and I got so busy in life. I mean, I'm not going to make excuses. I just didn't reply, and I didn't reply very fast. And, when people do that and they say, wow, this person never replies to comments, they just kind of quit leaving them. And new people go on there and they're like, well, this person never replies anyway, so I'm not going to worry with it. And I want to try to change that some way. And this is why I created a dedicated email for this show, which is me at brandonvaughn.com, VAUGHN. V is in Victor, by the way. I was a little bit worried about doing that. I don't think I'm going to just put a direct link on my webpage for fear of a lot of spam and robots that surf web pages and things like that. But I wanted to provide another way of contact. And one of the things I want to try to change a little bit is to be more interactive somehow, to involve some people and maybe in my life, such as Tori or other people into the show. I am tired of kind of always saying some similar things that just make it feel like a business to me, and it's not. I don't make any money off of this. In fact, I spend money on this. This show costs me money constantly to put out, and costs me every month, just to put this show out. And, I said this last week. I'm not sure if you heard that message, especially when I was closing up the show, where I was saying, okay, if you want to leave me a feedback, but I keep saying that anyway. I'm just kind of tired of saying all that stuff. I would still do this show even if nobody left me ratings. So why do I ask people to leave me ratings? Yes, it helps and it gets the word out, but honestly, if nobody left me a rating, it doesn't really destroy me. I mean, there's some people like Michael Hyatt's show, for instance, and he makes a living off this. That's his job. And it's therefore a lot of pressure that he has, that he needs a top 10 show. He needs to be in the rankings every week, because if he's not, people aren't going to his site and buying his stuff. And if people don't buy his stuff, then he has no money. So yeah, it's important for these people. But for me, yeah, it's not that big of a deal. I'm sure I'll leave links and stuff up on my website for people to do that. But otherwise, I just want to be maybe even more conversational with you guys than I've ever been before up to this point, and quit constantly plugging stuff all the time. Or if I plug stuff that has value. There's no value in rating the show, especially for you guys. But if I write something, that's value. So yeah, go to this site and download this for free or something like that. Yeah, you'll find value from that. But otherwise, there's a big shift in things. And I'm saying all this, and I'm not really sure what that means from a practical point of view. I think that I want to streamline the show in some ways, make it still professional sounding, but less professional like a business, and make it like a conversation that we have together somehow. And if that means that I need to bring someone on the show to make it even sound more conversational, like my friend, then yes, let's do something like that. And let's just kind of see how it goes. Here's where I want to ask your help. I want to hear from you about what it is that you like about this show, what you don't like about this show in honesty, what things you would like to see added, changed. And I have created a survey just for this. If you go to my website at firstthingsproductivity.com, you'll see the main post for this episode, which is episode 58. You can go to firstthingsproductivity.com/58, and you will see a direct link to a survey. Now, this survey is completely anonymous. You do not have to give me any information about yourself. No names. It can be completely anonymous. No emails. I'm not going to bother you with anything that you write me. And it is extremely short. It is 10 questions. So what I want to ask you to do and consider doing, especially if you are a fan of this show, is to go take this simple 10-question survey. It will probably take you no more than 5 or 10 minutes of your time. And I would just love to know some things that you really like about the show and some things you would like to hear me talk about. If you would like to see me do maybe webinars and books and things like that, and what topics you really want to hear more about, and do you think the show is too long? Do you want to see it more conversational? I mean, all these things. Do you want to have easier ways to contact me? These are things I would love to know, because you're my listeners and you give me your time every week to listen to me. And therefore, I'm here for you. And I need to know where you are in your life. I need to know what things you're struggling with, what things you want to hear about, what attracted you to this show to begin with, why you keep coming back every single week, which I thank you for and deeply appreciate. But I want to hear what you need, because that's really why I'm doing this, is to help you, my listeners. So if you go there, and there's also another short link to this, if you go to firstthingsproductivity.com/survey. Remember, things is plural, firstthingsproductivity.com/survey. And it will take you directly to this survey, and you can enter it in. 10 questions. About half of these are more things where you can type things. And I would really appreciate if you might take some time and write in a sentence or two about things that I'm asking for in these particular questions. And if you can, I'm hopeful that maybe through the month of September, I'll announce this and remind you about this, and then I will let you know what you guys said. So I'll mention it in a future podcast. I will also put it up on a blog post and tell you what things you told me about and what things really stood out. And I'm going to let that help guide some changes to this podcast as well. I mean, there's so many things we could do with the podcast if you think it might be more beneficial to you, such as maybe instead of going on for 40 minutes to an hour about some topic, maybe you would prefer a shorter podcast over these things and really hit the high points and trim the fat and go after the essential information, or break it up into smaller segments where we talk about this. I don't think I have room in my life to do a daily podcast. Some people do that, where they'll do a daily podcast of 5 or 10 minutes. A lot of times what those people do is they just record the entire week of podcast all at once. And I don't know if that would really fit for the theme of this show. I think we need a little bit of time to dig some things apart. But again, anything that really resonates with you and would benefit you in greater ways, I would love to hear about that. So I think we're going to stop for today. I've kind of rambled on a little bit longer than I thought I would. So remember the two basic things that we wanted to talk about today. One was some of the practical ways I've been putting essentialism in my own life, how I've really been implementing it by just simply dedicating 30 minutes in the morning and 30 minutes at night to pursue two of my bigger passions in life. And I'm starting to see some really great results with that. And I think eventually, although this isn't the first book I'm writing, I plan on writing my second book directly related to some of the topics that we cover in this podcast. And therefore, I would love to know what kind of things really resonate a lot with you. And the second thing that I want you to take away from today is one that I really appreciate you listening to me. And because I appreciate you so much, I want to give you a voice in what we do going forward with the show by taking the survey, firstthingsproductivity.com/58 or firstthingsproductivity.com/survey will take you directly to this simple 10-question survey that I would love to hear what you have to say. So we will leave it here, and we're going to pick this up next week by getting into the next chapter of the Essentialism book, and we're going to be talking about the issue of play. We've talked about this issue before in the Now Habit, about how recreation and play were essential to overcoming procrastination. We're going to hit that topic again, and I found one or two clips that I will probably play for you next week that may be a lot more interesting than the clip from last week. I always listen to my shows just to hear if there's any problems and what I think about it if I was just a different listener. And to be honest with you, I found the talk by the lady percussionist to be interesting to me because I was a musician. When I listened back to it, of all the episodes I've done, 57 episodes up to that point, I thought, I shouldn't have played 30 minutes of that clip. I should have probably just played 5 minutes. The whole thing was interesting to me, but I don't know, since I was using it as a metaphor and analogy, if I should have played the entire 30-minute clip. It was a little bit long. So apologies if you found it a little bit boring. That wasn't my intention. I should have probably trimmed that up. But the clips I'm going to play for you next week, at least one, maybe two clips, are going to be about play and the essential nature to play. I think you'll find them of great interest. Now, although I'm getting away from kind of scripted endings, I still very much believe in what I always tell you. And so we'll end here by what I always mention at the very, very end of these episodes. Still very much believe that. And that is simply that you embrace today with passion and intention. And don't die with your music still inside you. Good to talk to you guys. We will pick this up next week. See ya.